With us now are Zoltan Istvan and Neal. A pleasure to have you back on the show, sir.
Thank you.
Neal, I can't reach you. How are you doing?
Oh, great, Richard. Thank you.
What's new in this day and age, Zoltan?
It's also new. Every single month, it's changing. It doesn't matter if it's gene editing technologies, robotic hearts, or mind-uploading EEG technologies with brainwave headsets. It seems like every month the science and the technology is exponentially improving. So when you ask me what's new, it's like it couldn't be more exciting, the things that are happening in how we're affecting our lives.
How things have changed from the days centuries ago where people would plow their fields with horse and cart or whatever it is and plow, and in a lifetime nothing changed. Neal, and you've been following progress. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, Richard, it's exciting times. I think there was a Chinese philosopher who said that you should live in exciting times, and these are the most exciting in history. We are now at the precipice of finding a way to reverse aging. We are now beginning to look at aging and treat aging as a disease for which we will find a cure. It's just inevitable. I don't know when, and I don't know how, but I know it's very close.
What would you like to add to that, Zoltan?
Well, I couldn't agree more. We're incredibly close, and I think over the next 10 years, the only thing that's going to change is hopefully culture. People broadly are going to start embracing this idea that living indefinitely is a very good thing, and living indefinitely is something that should be supported. And so I'm really excited about that as well.
This is also very interesting, but I'd like to ask you about critics. Many people criticize the concept of what you're doing, and it's as if they embrace and are totally agreeable with the thought of working hard all your life and then passing away. What about the controversy that you're subjected to?
Well, I think that's part of anything that is revolutionary, and living indefinitely is absolutely revolutionary. So we're going to have something that essentially challenges us to do these kinds of things. And that's okay. A challenge is going to be okay. So we just need to embrace whatever resistance is thrown at us and allow it to happen.
Let me interject. You mentioned criticism, and it's not the critic that counts. I think you may recall Teddy Roosevelt's quote. It's not the critic that counts. It's not the man who points out to where the strong man has stumbled or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. It's the man who is actually in the arena that counts, with his face marred by blood and sweat and dust. And that, I think, exemplifies you, Zoltan.
I have to remain strong about it, and I have to remain open-minded about it. I mean, this is something radical we're talking about. We're talking about something that has never happened in the history of, of definitely humankind. So it's okay that it is challenging. It's okay that people are getting upset. And I do believe over the next 10 years, many, many millions will start to embrace this and hopefully start putting some money into it. That's really my main goal, and what I'm trying to do with my outreach is just get people to put resources into life extension science.
Makes a lot of sense, and stem cell research and all of the other technologies and research going on. But Neal, what is the attitude of organized religion with a view to what you're doing?
Well, naturally, most of them embrace it. Embrace the transhumanist concept of what we're talking about. What we're talking about is life, extending healthy life. The reality is there are transhumanist members of most every church, as far as I know. The difference, I think, is how you might interpret things. From my point of view, if you take the quote that Jesus said, all these things I have done, and more you shall do, and greater things you shall do. I really butchered that quote, but the reality is that's what we're looking at. We're looking at making this planet a heaven on earth. There are those that would look to the book of Revelations and say, well, the end times. Well, I don't know about this dream that may have been had by one of the apostles. I'm not a biblical scholar, but I do know that any creator that created this planet, a beautiful planet, a wonderful Garden of Eden, would want to see it remain as a Garden of Eden, certainly would want the highest life form that has evolved from this planet to become a steward of this planet for many eons to come, and perhaps to leave this planet, go on to other planets to essentially create other Gardens of Eden on Mars, on the Jupiter moons and the moons of Saturn. And that's not only our destiny, but our obligation.
Well, I certainly agree with you, and I'm not into end times. So tell us more about the work you are doing, Zoltan.
Well, a lot of the work that I'm doing really centers around trying to convince people that radical technology is actually in their best interest. And as Neal had just said, there are many religious people out there that, it can be challenging for what we're trying to do, yet every single religion has some type of transhumanist kind of body to it. And if we can just reach that a little bit more, we might find ourselves having a much more spiritual-minded kind of transhumanism thrive. And that's something that I'm perfectly okay with, as long as everyone is working towards goals that make us live indefinitely and make us happier and hopefully eliminate disease and suffering. So a lot of my work is trying to unify people. It's trying to get people to embrace the bigger picture of what transhumanism is, which is we just want to eliminate suffering, and we want to spread our roots so that we can become that species that really makes the universe a very wonderful place.
Who can argue with unlimited lifespans? Who can argue with reducing the situations eliminating wars? Who can argue with the concept of eliminating disease? That is what Zoltan stands for.
Yeah, I mean, it's impossible to argue. In fact, a lot of the things that I've been talking about as I've been on a bus tour across the country is, this idea that science is really wonderful. Why don't we spend more money on science and less money on bombs? Why don't we spend more money on a war on cancer than some far-off war? So it's a message that almost everyone gets. I really haven't found one person in all the traveling that I've recently done for transhumanism and life extension that is not on board with the mission. The thing, though, is that it seems so huge of a task to try to get human beings to live forever. Such a huge task to maybe downsize the military and upsize the medical and the scientific industry in America and abroad. So these are things that worry people, but we can get there with enough strength, with enough energy, and with enough dedication.
A question many of our viewers would like an answer to is, how did you get involved in the concept of transhumanism?
Well, my story is a little bit strange. I used to work for the National Geographic Channel, and I had covered some conflict zones. And one conflict area, even though it wasn't in a war, was Vietnam. But the entire demilitarized zone is covered with landmines. And I was doing a story on bomb diggers, where they basically, rice farmers unbury bombs on a daily basis to sell the metal and make a lot more money from that than doing rice farming. But by doing that, you have to go through these landmined areas all the time. So a lot of these bomb diggers end up blowing themselves to pieces. So I was doing this story, and I had a very close call with a landmine on one of my final days of filming. And my guide pushed me out of the way, and we fell within like a foot of the landmine. He showed it to me later. I just hadn't seen it. It was half buried. And it just converted me. I just said, what, I can't believe I'm not dedicating all my life, all my energy to living indefinitely. Why don't I fight death? It was just a philosophical bomb went off in my head when I looked at that landmine and thought, I could have been dead. And then I thought, I'm going to dedicate my life to living indefinitely. I'm going to dedicate my life to transhumanism. So I came back and, I just wrote a book. I'm spreading transhumanism. I'm writing a ton of columns now about it. I'm just doing everything I can to spread a message. But it has to do because that moment I just got really bummed out. I said, I could have died. That would have been terrible.
What an interesting introduction into deep thought that was. And Neal, I'd like to ask you the same question. You've been reading books on science fiction and science fact. What led you to this interest?
That is a question that we would need more time for, and I'm looking forward to a time when we have more time. But going into a brief, if I may, I essentially had a short correspondence with Arthur C. Clarke. Sir Arthur C. Clarke was the man who wrote 2001 Space Odyssey. And he and his writings and his philosophy, if you will, led me to investigate cryonics and the idea of potentially living indefinitely, in a nutshell.
Neal, this is all very interesting. Zoltan, again, a real pleasure. We'll continue this conversation after the commercial break. We'll be right back.